This is crack.
Biohazard 2.
Isn't it crazy that that ad was directed by Guillermo del Toro? Like Shape of Water, Hellboy, Guillermo del Toro? I don't know, something to think about. Resident Evil has always been a staple of the gaming industry since the 5th generation of gaming consoles. The mixture of using pre-rendered environments, which was a very common technique used back in the day, where you would create these highly detailed assets and 3D models and bake them into a 2D image while still maintaining all the graphical fidelity and the design choices created by the developer. And it would work perfectly in the first 3 RE games because of the fixed camera angles. So if you notice why like RE Origins or even Final Fantasy VII all had these insanely real environments, is because they were already made to exist and they didn't need to call upon the console or the computer to create this geometry, to create all this new stuff again. If you'd like me to talk more about it, please let me know in the comments down below. And using the limitations of the console to build anxiety with every door.
I don't know.
Alex, grab it.
I'm not gonna grab that. You grab it.
From there, the franchise exploded, creating Resident Evil 2, 3, Survivor, Survivor 2, Code Veronica, Resident Evil Garden, Resident Evil 1 Remake, Resident Evil 0, the prequel to the remake of Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil Dead Aim, Resident Evil Outbreak, until we finally reached the granddaddy of them all, Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 4.
When people talk about the list of perfect video games, Resident Evil 4 is usually at the top of that list in some way, shape, or form. The blending of horror elements with over-the-top action made it widely acceptable to the mainstream audience, because although horror is accepted, it is still a very niche genre. And to put it bluntly, Resident Evil 4 I wouldn't consider scary, except for that one section.
There's been numerous injuries.
There you go. What the fuck?
With the extremely heavy success of Resident Evil 4, it took a solid 5 years for the next mainline entry with Resident Evil 5. The title doubled down on action elements, following Chris Redfield, who has been looking yoked since the last time we ran into him in Code Veronica, to Africa in a monster hunting, boulder punching, co-op shooting adventure. And although I love this game because of how many hours I sunk into it playing with my brother and boulder punching, it was somehow even less scary than Resident Evil 4. And so the franchise continued in this action adventure direction when we came across Resident Evil 6, which, if you're a Resident Evil fan at that time, it left a really weird taste in your mouth. Although the game is really fun, and if you have a co-op partner, I really recommend checking it out if it's on sale on Steam for like 10 bucks. It's genuinely some of the stupidest fun you could ever have in a game. And although the residents are still evil, the real biohazard is that it left every horror aspect of the franchise behind. Sure, they tried to make the Leon focus section more the scary side, but it wasn't even, leaving it to a very mixed reception amongst the fans and reviewers. And with those mixed reviews and a very bloated budget, costing to close to about 100 million before inflation. I got the number, by the way, by several accounts, stating that even though the game sold about 5 million units on launch, and apparently that had them barely break even. So the focus became clear. Make a game that continues the franchise while returning to its roots. Push graphical fidelity as hard as possible without going over budget. Have it be the shortest development time possible. And of course, absolutely no delays. Incredibly easy, I know. I'm also not going to go into the full design process because there's already a fantastic video by DX that came out a couple years ago that did a phenomenal job of summarizing the workflow of the whole title. And even the GDC talk they did that I used a lot of reference for on this, they did 7 years ago, brought up a lot of important points. But I'm going to go over the bigger aspects necessary that created this level of efficiency that went on to influence the rest of Capcom's titles. The philosophy while creating RE7 was a mixture of iteration while maintaining everything that made it great to begin with. In pre-production, they used a workflow called Agile. By the way, I'm going to use several producer terms. One being Agile, which is a workflow where everyone works at the same time on different little things. And Waterfall, where if you work on one thing, it'll be passed on to another. Like say you're working on a gun, you have the design of the gun, the modeling of the gun, or the animation, then the sound, and then the VFX. You always need the person in the other department to finish their work before you get started on your own work, if that makes sense. So it all trickle down. It's the trickle down economics of game development, if you think about it. In pre-production, people were allowed to pitch ideas and implement anything that they found interesting, allowed people to do what they want and be put in the positions to do so. Because when you find a developer that's passionate about a feature, they will do anything they can to make sure they get it done. My favorite pillar they had was, and I quote, "Everyone should be motivated to think of the game as a whole in order to make it better," meaning everyone needs to have hands in any section of the pipeline rather than only their job title, thus pushing everyone to have a sense of ownership throughout the sections of the game and make their team far more passionate about the project than they would if they would only work on one thing. And although that leads more often than not to a lot of chaos, a lot of things on the cutting room floor, it's better to have people care about something than be insanely apathetic and just doing it for a day-to-day thing. Allowing the chaos and having people be excited for the title in pre-production prepares you to realize how people will actually work in a full production and make sure their ideas are realized. Having a heavy emphasis on passion and group contributions and making sure all those passions are realized no matter how good, bad, or weird, they were always heard no matter what. After the launch of Resident Evil 7, all of Capcom had not only fire under them, but a brand new engine to play with. The RE engine, which side note stands for Reach for the Moon, not Resident Evil engine. Like, I get it because the philosophy of the company would be everyone deserves a sense of innovation and every company and every IP should push the engine differently in some way rather than just Resident Evil. But it's right there, come on. Was created to allow every IP that Capcom had and be able to be customized to their own use. Devil May Cry, Ghosts and Goblins, Monster Hunter, Street Fighter, Dragon's Dogma, Dead Rising. All these vastly different games and different art styles run surprisingly well on the RE engine. They've been able to be created fairly quickly given the small time frame. Or at least it feels like a small time frame. All these titles work together to send new ideas to each other and release back to back to back. Because if one title succeeds, it means there's more money to the rest of the company, which means more funding, which means more titles, which means you have more time to innovate and focus on the design philosophies of everything else in between. Hi, Editor Adrian here. I'm gonna apologize for this next section sounding a little more melancholic and depressed. I'm not depressed. I kind of just blew my voice out a little bit so I couldn't inflect too much while I was recording. And I just wanted to get this video out in time because the new Elden Ring Night Ring thing is coming out this weekend. So I just kept it. So I apologize if it seems a little bloated or like I'm about to blow my brains out or boring. But a lot of things I said here were really important, I feel. And I'm sorry, I'm not cutting it because I was kind of spitting a little bit, but I ain't cutting that shit. Okay, use code ANYGAY for 10% off at gamersubs.gg. Okay, bye. See you, or not bye, but... With a heavy emphasis on efficiency, using photogrammetry, scan data, pushing constant design knowledge, and allowing everyone in a department to help work together over essentially what is a group project that just happens to be funded by millions of dollars and if not billions of passionate people throughout the world. The video game industry is currently going through again what happened back in 2012. This is just my judgment call, where we're reaching a point of so much new technology and tech bloat, and innovation is happening so fast that anytime we want to see something in it, we want it in it immediately, and we can't utilize it. And most of the tools that are given and created and set up are 1 to 2 decades old. Even right now as I'm making this video, the RE engine is being slowly phased out to the new REX engine for the next generation of Resident Evil titles and whatever other titles. And Capcom's focus on allowing more internal use of their technology while utilizing all these new techniques throughout the industry is becoming what should always be a standard. But I don't think that's what we should take away from this video and their practices of in-house work. With so many studios switching to Unreal, mostly like Microsoft is a huge example with Halo moving over, with more than likely every other IP in-house is going to end up moving over to Unreal just because it's easy to iterate on. We might lose a lot of what makes gaming feel unique. But even then, I feel with Capcom's emphasis on pre-production and allowing developers to do their job and develop within a time frame, and given a lot of restrictions, you will be able to get more games out the door than you would think. Hell, even the titles I've worked on, and the fastest turnaround titles I've worked on were Call of Duty, which is a yearly title and has bajillions of dollars behind it. Get GTA 6 having officially $1 billion budget and got pushed to exactly next year from now. Forza Motorsport taking about 5 to 6 years, if not more. Naughty Dog's new game isn't slated for, and it's past the 5-year mark. There's not a heavy focus on allowing and pushing restriction, but there's not a focus on actually getting the game out the door. I genuinely believe our focus has always been on, at least on the Western side, is pushing technology without quite a bit to back it up. Setting the team up for success in a pre-production sense will always be the hardest part. Getting the ideas out early that may or may not work, cutting them early, and then pushing people to just get so much work done in the middle half, then doing more cuts in the middle, and then allowing people just to focus on the final 3 quarters to get the game out the door seems common sense, but I don't know why we've gotten to the point where we focus so much on noodling, on tiny specific things, on techniques and stuff. Like there is an artistry to game development. There has to be. Like without it, we're just sloppy bullshit. We're just sloppy. It's just slop. And just on a personal note, I feel like there is a lack of innovation in new ideas, except for like Claire, the new Exposition 33 game, which was made by a small team because they were able to take a risk on something new rather than have a bajillion dollars behind an idea that may or may not make it back, because people are scared to put out a risky title out of fear of never making the money back, which is going to be the forever issue with video games as we go forward. So we have 1 or 2 options as an industry, in my opinion. We either focus so much on pre-production on the tech side and give like 1 to 2, like a year or 2 to develop the engine, which even then it's like, I don't know if that's realistic. I don't know the logistics of that. And then just spend 3 years in hard development, and then from then on out you constantly are able to push the new tech, make new games going forward until you inevitably need to update it again. Or we just accept the fact that we're not going to always make our money back on every title and every weird idea, and maybe we just let the weird artsy kid make a weird artsy game just to see what happens. We need a Pentiment, we need a Blueprints, we need a Exposition 33. We need those games along with our Dooms, our Last of Us, and all that stuff. But we need to but also rein them in a little bit, make sure they get it out the door, because Lord knows we've had too many titles just die out of fear of making $1 bajillion. We don't need everything to make $1 bajillion. Sometimes we just need something to keep the other titles that will make $1 bajillion afloat, you know? We need our Exoprimals. We need our Resident Evil Resistance. We need our Ghosts and Goblins Resurrections. Hell, we need a Resident Evil 3 just to test the idea of combat rolling and parrying for Resident Evil 4 and a heavier action-focused game. Sometimes you just need stuff like that. On a less somber note, games like Exposition 33 do give me a lot of hope. Even with the Baldur's Gates, even the Baldur's Gates was in development hell for like a decade. Fresh ideas are never going to go out of style. And also, maybe here's a thought: don't burn out the passion of your work of your developers. Right? Seems simple enough, but cutting them down for the sake of your own ego over a fucking small thing, just to be petty, or just because it's stupid. We all want to make good games. We all want to play good games. We all want to push things that will make us excited like we did when we were kids. Let us do that. It's all we want to do anyway. And sometimes you just need people to back up your ideas for whatever comes next. That's all I have, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
No. If we're gonna die, then we should get to choose when it happens.